Thank you, Nadia. Welcome, everyone, to the 2026 SEGD Voices webinar series. This is a free and open to all as part of SEGD's commitment to professional learning, knowledge sharing, and community connection. If you don't know SEGD, if is your first SEGD event, Nadia, can you go to the next slide? We are designers of experiences connecting people to place. We're a nonprofit member organization focused on our multidisciplinary community. We are graphic and exhibition designers, fabricators and architects, media developers and creative technologists, students and educators. And each of our members brings a diverse set of expertise, but we all share a common motivation to make the built environment more inclusive and intuitive, emotive and engaging, sustainable and shared. You can learn more about us at scgd.org. And this year in 2026, we have asked our professional practice groups to curate the SEGD Voices series. And so we have three different professional practice groups. We have digital and interactive media, which is led by Sarah Smith and Nathan and Judith. We have our museum exhibition professional practice group led by George Mayer and Steve Rosen. And we have our wayfinding and experiential graphic design professional practice group led by Daniela and Amy Weiss. So if you're interested, you can go to our website and check that out. Go to the next slide. So, what we hope to do through these professional practice groups is to foster development and innovation across the spectrum of experience design. And these forums allow members to deepen their knowledge, connect and engage in various activities. We do events in person, we do them virtually, and members can choose their own level of involvement. So, definitely check us out. And in a minute, I'll put that in the chat. So if you want to link to our website, you can do that. And this particular webinar today is led by our SEGD Museum Exhibition Professional Practice Group. But the person who really put all this together and who deserves the big shout out is Marie Klippel. And she's the one who is, really curated the speakers and helped us in preparing for this. So I have to really thank you, Marie. You've done a fantastic job. And with that, and Marie is one of the leaders of our museum exhibition professional practice group accessibility committee. So she's been doing an amazing job in that role. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marie to introduce our moderator and panelists today. Thank you, Marie.
Thank you so much, Isabel. This is Marie Clapo speaking. I'm a white female in her 40s with right now wearing brown hair in a bun. And I'm going to turn that right away because, not just to throw flowers to everyone, but who deserves the credit is the whole committee and especially our moderator today, which leads me to introduce her, Jan Majewski. Has really been the force in putting all this panel together, and I assisted. So Jan Medeski is the Director of Inclusive Cultural Projects at the Institute for Human-Centered Design, and to join us today as our moderator. We're also joined by Beth Ziebarth, who is the Director of the Office of Visitor Accessibility at the Smithsonian Institution. Many of you might already know her. With more than 30 years at the Smithsonian, Beth has led efforts and has been a pioneer in the field to expand engagement with the disability community and ensure that visitors can equitably experience both physical and digital environments across the institution. We're also joined today by Valerie Fletcher, who is the Executive Director at the Institute for Human-Centered Design, and which brings a global perspective on accessibility and inclusive design. Since 1998, Valerie has led the Institute work advancing design as a driver of social equity across ability, age, and culture, working internationally across education, policy, and practice. And finally, we're joined by Annie List, who is an artist and accessibility professional based in New York. Annie is currently works in access programs and initiatives at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. Her role includes creating programs centering disability as a lens for exploring modern and contemporary art, advising on inclusive exhibition design, facilitating staff training around accessibility and disability equity, and strategic planning for disability inclusion across the museum. So we are so pleased to have the four of you today for this panel. And I'll turn it to Jen.
Thank you, Marie. Hello, everyone. I am a white woman with silver hair and I wear glasses. We have a stellar panel of discussants today to talk about the power of lived experience, user experts informing exhibition design. We're going to dive right in and begin the discussion, followed by a question and answer session. So if all of the panelists can make themselves available, we will go to our first question, which is, what makes visiting an exhibition a valuable, enjoyable experience for each of you? What makes it feel inclusive, excluding, or segregating? And who benefits from the inclusive design of exhibitions? Beth, do you want to take a first try?
Sure. So I love museums, and the best exhibition experiences are when I can take in the content without thinking about accessibility. In other words, access is so seamless that it doesn't stand out. I'm not pulled I'm not pulling out my phone, taking photos of examples of things that work or don't work in terms of accessibility. I'm a museum visitor and instead of a museum accessibility professional. So even better is when the content includes stories of disabled people so that I have more of a personal connection to the content. So that's my ideal.
Okay. Valerie.
Sure. Thanks, Jan. For me, I think it is really something that I see as a measure of the best experiences. Makes my blood run faster. I want to have something that arrests me a little bit, and that is partly about feeling connected.
Okay. And coming to Annie.
Hey, everybody. I think for me, it's kind of an interesting thing. We're talking about accessibility today, and a lot of times that has to do with barrier removal. But sometimes, as a person who has very low vision and uses a white cane when I navigate independently in most unfamiliar places, one of the things that actually makes me feel more welcome are the barriers in front of protecting artwork or protecting other museum exhibitions that tell me where to go and where not to go. Because when those barriers are not there, when there's not a platform or a low stanchion or some textured tape or some textured flooring that sort of gives me a clue that, hey, you're approaching something that might be an exhibition or that might be a piece of artwork, maybe on the floor. When those aren't there, and I run the risk of being punched in the face by a work of art or having my cane touch something that's directly on the floor that shouldn't be touched. It feels like my presence and the presence of other folks like me wasn't anticipated. And for me, it's a very sort of short mental leap from you were not anticipated to you were not wanted. So I really appreciate it when yes, of course, like Beth, when the access is seamless and I don't have to think about it, but also when it's present at all.
I love that, Annie. We're now talking about barriers for inclusive design, which is not usually how we phrase it. Well, on that note, Valerie, could you define inclusive design of exhibitions and broadly the role of user experts in that design?
Sure, Jan, thank you. Inclusive design builds on the low floor of compliant accessibility. I mean, we're the first ones to really be invested in absolute rigor, but also to remind people that it's a low floor. Um, The whole movement is designed to anticipate the broadest spectrum of people across the broadest spectrum of situations. Most importantly, it's a framework for design that facilitates the best experiences. The focus is on experience for everyone. Exhibits are fundamentally about creating experiences. And I think there is really no alternative but to learn from people with lived experience. I mean, we gather global best practice assiduously every day of the week. But there is no substitute for learning from people whose lived experience is different from the typical designer. So working with user experts delivers that subjective information that is a tool for designing better experiences. And lastly, just inclusive design, there's no holy grail. There's no endpoint. We are constantly learning, and that is the only way to do it appropriately.
Okay. Annie or Beth, would you like to add anything? Valerie covered it all. Okay. So let's go on further and talk about who are user experts and what can they contribute to exhibitions' inclusive design. Beth, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure, thank you. So we have um, recruited approximately 40 people from the DC area, people who have disabilities, who volunteered to be a user expert for different types of testing or co-design of exhibition components, or if we want to talk about a public program design, a variety of different ways that we want to reach out to the community. Um, and so those 40 people that we recruited, many of them we had worked with for years, and they come from different parts of the disability community, have different disability characteristics, they have different backgrounds, and they all have enthusiasm for museums, which is wonderful. And making sure that museums provide them with a good experience. So, in working with these people, we have our group, we also have access to the IHCD group of, I think you have what, over 300 people now?
Yeah, 400, yeah.
400, yes. Amazing number of user experts through IHCD. So when we have a project where the exhibition team has asked us to bring in user experts to test or to co-design, um, then we can turn to these people. And we're looking for people when we recruit who can talk about their experience and articulate kind of step by step what they're experiencing when they are assessing an exhibit component or a public program. But we also want to have a conversation with designers. And so that's part of the process. And we want them to think beyond themselves and how the experience is going to impact people who have similar disabilities. So that's one of the key things in recruiting a good user expert. Um, we really work on building trust with user experts in that we are taking the information that they provide, we value it, and we provide them with an honorarium for participating in our testing, and we share the information with the exhibition team, and it's the kind of thing where it has really engaged the whole exhibition team to have user experts in the design process. So user experts tell us that they enjoy doing this because they like the iterative design process in particular, where they come in at different stages of the design and they can see progress being made based on the things that they told us about in the testing. And then they get to experience the final product. And then at that point, it's almost like a feeling of ownership that they had um, the ability to really impact the design. And I think one of the things that is important about user expert contextual inquiry is that uh, designers or vendors who are doing work on exhibit components
can hear directly from people with disabilities about the functionality of their work, and they're hearing it from the people who are going to benefit from it rather than mediated through a museum staff person. So I'm happy to have Valerie and Annie jump in and provide additional information.
Annie, do you want to start? I've got a few things I'd like to just add.
Go for it, Valerie.
Okay. We have actually done this in 6 different countries as well as across the US. So we are proof that you can actually recruit user experts even if you don't have history with them, and that has worked extraordinarily well. One of the things that is important in the work that we do is that, to the extent possible, in every review in our museum work in particular, we are bent on always including user experts that have physical, that have sensory, and that have brain-based reasons for functional limitation. We also work hard to engage people who are non-traditional museum goers. So we have with regularity had user experts who are open to the experience, but may be entering a museum for the first time. Many of those are people from multicultural communities and low-income communities, the kind of people that we've all been trying to bring into our museums to expand our audience. And that has actually been wonderfully exciting, and not without its challenges, but when somebody connects and shows the power of what a museum can do to them, what an exhibit can do, that is the most potent moment for the staff who are participating in this process. So I just wanted to add that bit.
Annie, anything else to add?
Apologies, y'all. I'm having microphone issues. Um, I feel like they covered it all. The one thing I think about that might be worth just flagging is Beth kind of alluded to this, but I feel like it's important to pull out the fact that, and this will probably be repeated, pull out the fact that it's not just a one and done situation that Beth kind of was mentioning when you're working with user experts throughout a design process, bringing them back more than once to sort of see the iterations of the design, I think is a really wonderful thing to try to do.
Perfect, Annie. That leads right into our next question, which is how and when are user experts involved? The process is doable, well worth doing, but you have to build a system to make it work. And we'll turn to Annie to start this one.
Great. I think my basic answer to this question is early and often. I think there are no moments in the design process where you can't benefit from bringing folks in to sort of talk about things and give their feedback and sort of have that reality show TV cast of diverse voices present and offering their thinking on this. I think that there are also, there are lots of different ways to get sort of feedback, and some feedback is better than none, but I think what we're trying to encourage is, having folks sort of participate in many, many stages. And you do have to have sort of a system for that. You have to be able to find the folks that you want to give the feedback and give their opinions. You have to be able to facilitate and compensate them. You have to be able to, again, make their experience a positive one by meeting their access needs, whatever they are. And finding out what those access needs are actually, and remembering that those access needs begin before they might even get to your facility or where they're giving the feedback. And so that requires a bit of planning. And it also requires a bit of sort of thinking ahead and flexibility as well. Uh, I would say in my case, I actually another kind of model is ensuring that if you're working with people on a particular staff or if you are a staff member at an institution, um, if you have someone on your staff in a role that can give feedback, that is a disabled person, that is somebody who you might also be able to talk to. That's kind of the model that I tend to work for. I happen to be a disabled person who is in a role where I give a lot of part of my job is to advise on accessibility of exhibition design. And so often I wind up standing in for a user expert, and I am only one person with a particular disability, and I try to think broadly about other opinions and other disabilities. But I think that at least I am a starting place for where you might begin to get responses about your designs at all levels. And I'm lucky because I am involved in the exhibition planning process from before there is even a finalized checklist for the exhibition. So it's kind of an exciting place to be. I would also say that another part of my role is with the team that I work on is we often bring in external stakeholders because, as I said, I am only one person, and so I can't be the user expert for everything. So I would say, again, to summarize, early and often.
Beth, Valerie?
Sure. Let me say that one of the things that has proven to be extremely valuable to us is that our work in exhibition design tends to be a combination of an analysis of existing conditions and design review or plan review as an exhibit is being built. And one of the things that has been a real asset is to have built a team of designers, many of whom are user experts. They are people with lived experience of disability. And that has made a big difference in how we do design review of a new exhibition. And that's usually a starting point. We're also beginning to do more ways to depict design development for people with a variety of abilities through tactile drawings and 3D models so that people can actually participate as early as possible. I think part of what we want to make sure that we've communicated today is that engaging user experts is partly about helping you to have insight about what's working, what's not working, and in most all cases, it's also about what people think would work better. And I have to just assure you that part of it is pretty routinely, it is pretty small things that people recommend that are powerfully better than what they're experiencing right away. They really want you to understand tinkering at the edges can sometimes be a powerful improvement over the experience of people with different abilities. And that's just something I just want to make sure people hear that because it is so often our experience.
Beth, did you want to add anything?
I'll just say that, like Annie, being a person with a disability in this position of accessibility um, at the Smithsonian, people often expect that I'm going to have the answer for all disabilities. And, I'm often wrong. It may be that somebody who is deaf or somebody who is um, has low vision has a different idea about how they would prefer to access content. So it is a good check on what I might suggest, and really, it's so fruitful to have that discussion with a variety of people to see what works and what doesn't.
But I add something to that? This is Annie again. I just want to say that, like, some of our most lively conversations are when we have several different folks who are blind or have low vision, like I am, in the same room talking about, for example, audio descriptions. We get a lot of community advisement on our audio descriptions that we do at the museum here, and so it's not even just having folks with different disabilities, but having multiple folks who might identify in the same way, but everyone is different with their own different opinions, so
And if I might just add one more comment, that it is critically important to us that we are including people whose brains work differently. In the United States, we have absolutely irrefutable commitment to physical and mental disabilities as our commitment to equity. And today in America, the largest reason for disability among adults now matches what has been the largest reason for disability among children and youth for 30 years, which is a spectrum of brain or cognitive-based issues. So we never do a user expert review of exhibit design or wayfinding or much of anything else that doesn't include people with physical, sensory, and brain-based issues. And more, we're really finding, this is a challenging but worthy part of the process that results in things that improve everybody's experience. We all bring our bodies and brains to everything we do, and they vary from day to day. So this is just looking at the edges to get answers that will work better for all of us. Thanks.
Great. Thank you all. We're going to go now from a general explanation of what user expert testing and co-design are to some specific examples. And Beth, could you describe a user expert session in exhibition design that is focused on testing?
Sure. So I thought that a good example would be when we worked with the National Museum of the American Latino on their inaugural exhibition, Presente. And that particular exhibition, we had buy-in from the exhibition team from the beginning on the idea of inclusive design. So they were very interested in the concept and wanted to make sure that it was carried out throughout the design process, and user experts are part of that process. So we had set the stage for user expert input by having the discussion at the very beginning about what inclusive design is. Um, because this was um, an exhibition where we were going to be reacting to exhibition components, it's different than what Annie will talk about, which is co-design. So this was much more about reacting to already things that were in the design process. So there were some key things that we were using in the exhibition that were pretty new to the Smithsonian and to the exhibition team in particular. We had alternative ways that we wanted to be able to deliver content from touch screens. And so the way we were going to be doing that was through keypads, and keypads were used throughout the exhibition space wherever there were touchscreens. And the key thing that we needed to do was at the very beginning of the exhibition, have an onboarding accessibility station where people could learn about our process for going through the space and accessing content. So if they missed the accessibility onboarding station, they could catch up, but it was certainly helpful if they knew how to use that through the station. So we tried to drive people to the onboarding station where they would get step-by-step information about how to use a keypad, and had information about the layout of the exhibition space and other ways that we were providing basically cues for where to access things. So we had tactile strips on the floors for people to be able to, who are cane users, um, people who are blind or have low vision, so that they would be able to know when we had a component that had audio description and they could access the QR code and get to the information, or that there was a keypad there. So getting that kind of information was really important, and we wanted to make sure that we tested it with user experts and that it made sense. So it did lead to some changes in not only kind of the keypad directions, but also just the way we describe the layout of the space, so that was more logical for people who would be using that information. And then the keypads themselves with the touch screens. One of the things that the keypads did was delivered audio description in addition to navigating through the touch screens. So we wanted to make sure that the audio description that we were developing was um, that the content was being delivered in a way that was easily understood, and also that we were not spending hours and hours describing something when people wanted much shorter information. And were able to see the whole exhibition instead of spending all their time at one touch screen. So we did a lot of work with the audio description with user experts, and that was really beneficial. Another part to it was working with a uh, screen device that the vendor had the developed to raise and lower the screen so that people could be at eye level with the speaker who was on the screen. And we made sure that we tested that with people with disabilities so that it was something that was understood about how to do that and that it worked. That this idea that they had of making it more possible to have a face-to-face conversation with the speaker was actually working. So I think that one of the key things too is that this was iterative, that we brought the same people back multiple times to continue to test during different phases. The exhibition team themselves, and especially the software designers, learned so much from this experience, not only with integrating keypads into the exhibition, but also things like, length of audio description and um, the kind of detail that you do. So I think all of those things really ended up with a good product. And again, like what I was saying earlier, that the people who participated as user experts taught the exhibition team and the vendors a lot, but they were also, what they got out of this was that they felt like they had really impacted the exhibition.
So perfectly timed, Beth, on top of being so rich in information. Beth alluded to the fact that Annie is now going to talk about describing a user expert session that collaborates with user experts in co-design. Annie?
Sure. So what I'm going to share, a lot of my experience in recent years has come through my job at a museum, and so I'm going to talk about an experience or a couple experiences I've had, sort of where it was a more collaborative feeling. That is a bit more like co-design, so a little bit more of an informal version of co-design than how you might define it as design professionals. And some of my favorite experiences on this front have been in when I've had opportunities to work directly with artists who are installing work in the museum. Particular example is an exhibition we had a few years ago by Amanda Williams, called Embodied Sensations. It was during the pandemic, sort of after lockdown was ending, but a lot of things were social distancing was still very common, and a lot of things were still sort of very, if not locked down, sort of we were learning to kind of be a little bit more cautious in our space. And this sort of exhibition of Williams's was asking a lot of questions about who had privileges to move in and out of spaces, who was able to kind of uh, be in a space and move through a space, and who was prohibited in various ways. And so I'm not going to go into tremendous detail about the meaning behind the exhibition, but a few of the elements were things that that MoMA staff, including myself, got to sort of participate on. And one in particular, well, the installation included a lot of museum seating that was left in piles, so it was basically unusable. A lot of what Williams was commenting on is the language of museums with seating, with barriers, with signage, and it was probably the first time at MoMA. For some reason, we call textured tape sparkle tape, which I find entertaining. Um, but it was the only time I've ever had a conversation in my life, about conceptual versus functional sparkle tape, because part of the installation had textured tape installed in ways that was meant to resemble a barrier, but not actually be a barrier. And we had a lot of interesting conversations about how to convey that to people who were blind. How does someone know when textured tape is just it was is a actually a part of an installation, and how does someone know when they're actually not intended to cross a line? So that was one interesting conversation. Even more interesting, and something that I was proud to have an even more direct impact on, was there was a performative aspect of this installation where periodically throughout its run, visitors could sign up to participate in a session that involved a series of instructions of how to move through the space or how to behave in the space, that were projected on large screens, overhead on the walls above where the installation was. And very early on, I was invited to read the language of those installations that had been created by the artist and a choreographer colleague of hers, and actually make adjustments to it to remove ableist language, and to make it feel more universal, no matter what your physical or mental or sensory way of moving through a space is. So some things as basic as changing words from things like walk, to move or travel, adding opportunities for people to imagine or try things as opposed to physically doing them. And so that was, those changes were implemented in these instructions that were offered to the public, and that was really a very exciting thing to sort of have this direct impact on the artist's work. And we also worked in a lot of ways to make sure that those instructions were available to everyone. There was no way I was going to read them off a big screen, but I do have images of myself walking backwards with my cane through the exhibition, moving backwards, I should say, through the exhibition as one of the instructions required, with an assisted listening set of headphones on my ears, with someone from MoMA staff reading the instructions, and that was available to anybody who wanted to receive the instructions through audio, as opposed to trying to read them and perform them at the same time. And those experiences of sort of co-creating, in some ways, maybe is a better word than co-designing with artists. You find typically, I think sometimes people are a little afraid that artists will say, no, we don't want to modify our vision to sort of make it more accessible. But our exhibition design team and my team have found that actually most artists are really amenable to this and really excited about bringing their work to broader audiences. And I've definitely had moments. Most recently, there is an artist who is completely changing how she is making a work that's going to be installed in MoMA this fall based on accessibility and safety concerns. She's literally making a different piece that balances her intentions with our concerns and ideas as a museum. And also I've had artists say things to me like, the suggestions that you and your designers made have changed how I perceive how my work can and should be installed. And that's really, really rewarding. So again, it's not necessarily a formal practice of co-design, but it's an opportunity to collaborate creatively from the inception of a piece to really transform the piece or transform the experience of the piece so that it works better for everybody and more people can connect to it in the ways that make sense to them.
Thank you, Annie. Um, as we reach the end of our discussion, I wanted to ask each of the panelists to just explain the overall, kind of a summary, explain the overall value to museums, designers, and most of all, the audiences of inclusive design in exhibitions that is developed and enriched with user expert input. And Valerie, if you could start this conversation.
Thank you, Jen. I think part of what I want to make clear is that this is an ordinary human experience. It isn't about them over there. This is, statistically, we're looking at more than 28% of adults. It's a large portion of our population. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that this also isn't necessarily an identity that everyone embraces. You may have a disability, you don't necessarily identify in that way. That is particularly true of older people and communities of color. And we have to be aware of that because the goal is not to have special solutions, but to have solutions that anticipate this reality of diversity. I think it's also important, especially for SEGD, because you folks are often the leads in understanding the holistic experience of the user, the visitor. And we find SEGD members to be tuned in to this idea that this is physical information and communication design. It's got to all work together. The individual visitor doesn't give a damn who's responsible. They want to have a good experience. So it has to be integrated. Um, and I think this rising tide of recognizing that mental or brain-based or cognitive reasons for disability is an enormous opportunity. We are doing a great deal of training on this. We are also working with a great many user experts who have this lived experience of being neurodivergent from the sort of shallow end of the pool with dyslexia and dyscalculia right through to autism spectrum disorder. But we are getting really invaluable insights about what works and what people feel makes them welcome. And there is no standard in the United States. We share a standard that our British friends have developed, but there isn't instruction out there. You learn from lived experience. And I think that learning has to be understood not to be a one-shot deal, but becomes inherent in practice. This is the way I do design. And I think what we're finding is that I confess I seek and find conversion experiences among our design partners. And we are finding that more and more, that people are seeing this as a real value add. It's not, what do I have to do? It's how can I create experiences that are just plain better? Thanks. And one last thing, Gene, if I could just say, for all of our designers and for all the designers and clients we work with, this is a practice that generates enthusiasm. This generates a fuel that makes you want to do more of it. And I would be remiss if I didn't share that with people. That is a thrilling part of this whole process. Thanks.
Thanks, Valerie. Beth, any one couple of last comments? We've got about 2 minutes left to our discussion.
Beth, you can go or I can add.
You go first, Annie.
Okay. I just want to bring in a couple ideas really quickly in the idea of ownership, or maybe belonging is a good word. I think one of my amazing panelists used the word ownership a little bit earlier, but this idea of when you bring people in and they feel like they have been a part of making something, then they do feel more connected to a space or an institution, and it feels less alien and less foreboding and more inviting, and they feel more invested and they're more likely to come back. And I also want to just bring in the idea quickly of access intimacy, which is a term coined by Mia Mingus. It's a great blog post. You can Google it to find it. Kind of got a kind of gray definition, but it basically means that moment when you enter a space and or in a situation and you walk in and you realize your access needs are going to be met, and you sort of have a little bit of a sigh of relief. Maybe you put down the performative, you put down that defensive attitude that you might have where you feel like you're going to have to justify yourself or justify what you're asking for. And if we can use lived experience to create moments of access intimacy in institutions, that's only going to increase the level of connection that people feel to those institutions. And so I guess my question to you all is, why not do this? There's no downside.
You share it, Lori?
I don't think I need to add anything because that was very well said by both Valerie and Annie, and I just echo their sentiment.
Well, thank you all three. As I said, we have had a stellar panel today, giving and sharing a lot of really valuable information. So what we'd like to do is for just the next couple of minutes, turn to the audience and ask if anyone has questions that they would like to either direct specifically to one of the panelists or ask generally. And you can put your questions into the chat if you'd like. That would be the easiest way for us to grab them and direct them to a panelist.
And Jan, if your Mrs. Murray speaking, you can go ahead. I see some comments and questions. First one by Amir, who says it's impressive to see such thoughtful attention to inclusivity. I'd be interested to understand whether this approach is typically driven by the design team or defined as part of a client's brief.
Interesting question. Beth, would you like to take that one? As being the client of the museum, as the museum.
Right. I think that this is an approach that is typically driven by the accessibility office in working with exhibition teams. So it may not be the first thought of an exhibition team to do something like user expert sessions, but in discussing how you're going to do accessibility in an exhibition, then you have the ability to bring it up and talk about incorporating it into the design phases. Does anybody else want to add to that?
Yep. Jan, if I might just jump in, because we do very extensive consulting and design services with museums all over the country. And um, this question of client versus design team is one that is always in front of my mind. And I'd have to say that traditionally, we have been better off if we are working directly for the client so that we are peers of the designers. And that means we don't get value engineered to the floor somewhere along the process. Um, but I will also say that increasingly, designers that we've worked with before are bringing us onto the team because they want more of it. They want to do it again. They want it to be part of the next project. So we're fortunate that we have a consistent set of relationships. I mean, we do no advertising. We are word of mouth. People are passing along, let's do this. So I think it can go either way. But I think my money's still on the power of the client to call the shots about this being valuable.
Annie, did you want to add anything? Okay. And if I can step out of my moderator role for a moment, we've done through ICD a lot of testing with and co-design with user experts. And the one of ICD's strengths is to build capacity of clients. And that's one of our goals and what we advocate for. So as Valerie said, you see design teams and you see the accessibility program is already there, but you see leadership saying, we did this before, we want to do this again, and we understand its value now, so we're we're going to jump right in and, work with you as opposed to it being just an outside consultant role. So that's been exciting to see as well.
And Jan, just to build on that, one of the things that's been very gratifying is that sometimes it's the director of the museum who gets hooked. And that's thrilling because at that point, nobody's arguing that this hasn't got real value.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Other questions?
There is another question by Ziebarth, actually, which I think is really interesting. If designers should just include a scope for this with their proposals, even if it's not in the RFP.
Yes, Sibyl.
Doesn't look like we're going to get any arguments here. Would anyone like to just talk to that specifically?
Again, maybe it works to say, why not?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is important to note, since we're not internal to the institutions like Beth is, we're not working for the institution like Annie is. So we're the outsider coming in to, hopefully build your capacity, but also do the work that needs to be done right now. And I think it it it's it's just deeply satisfying to get insight in a fresh way. I mean, that's what's been so successful is that people are excited by it, that they see it not as some assault on their expertise, because it is not. In many cases, people see it as an affirmation of their expertise because design is always about finding a balance, going as far as you can, and then figuring out when you are done. This is another element of that rich set of information and inspiration that gets us to the end of a design process. And just getting that insight from lived experience that is different from your own really gets the blood running faster.
Marie, I think we have time for one more question. Shall we?
Yeah, and we have a great one, which I think yes, I'll go by John. John, sorry. Can you recommend the best place to start this conversation with a museum that does not see its value?
Mm.
A rich and loaded question.
And and maybe if you allow me, just as members of the accessibility committee within SEGD, it is something that we're actually going to work on developing resources to support the SEGD community in having this conversation with cultural institution. But that doesn't applicate properly the panelists to answer that question as well.
I've never met a designer who wanted to be told or wanted to go by, just tell me what I have to do. I think that's part of the angle here is that this is really going beyond sort of looking at engagement of people with disabilities as compliance.
Mhm.
This is about experience. That's where you start the conversation.
And a little bit more sneaky strategic, potentially, could be Valerie has given us some really, you know, significant statistics to think about. And also, it's good to remember that those people who are that number of people who have disabilities are also have friends and family and money. And so recognizing that as a market, again, it's not necessarily the reason why we do these things. That's about the experience, but there is also a really good sort of reminder that this has a fiscal impact, a positive fiscal impact by creating accessible experiences and bringing in diverse audiences has a fiscal impact that is positive for museums and other institutions. So that's another kind of sneaky little thing you can bring up.
Beth, last words?
I was just going to say that, like I mentioned earlier, having the director of a museum be the one who says, we're going to use inclusive design for this exhibition or this project is, of course, the the ideal that you have buy-in from the top. And I think that's it's worth courting the director to make sure that from the concept through construction, you are thinking about inclusive design and how you are going to incorporate accessibility into the project.
And I'm going to just follow on just for a second. In recent years, we have increasingly been brought into projects by the director or the CEO, and that becomes how it happens. And that is thrilling because everyone pays attention.
Okay. Thank you all, and thank you, Sibel, for giving us this opportunity to bring this topic in.
Oh, amazing. I see that James Butler has a question. You know what, James? We'll forward that to Maria and Jan, and maybe we can get a follow up to that because it's a really good question. I'm worried that we'll get cut off in answering that. So, um, anyway, I just have to say a tremendous thank you. This was just phenomenal, and I feel so inspired by Annie and Valerie and Beth. I bringing this into a normal process and making it just a rigorous, evaluation that works through, and the examples that you gave, Annie, that it turned into something different. And I think every opportunity we had to co-create and co-curate. So thank you, Marie. Also, I'm looking forward to the Accessibility Committee's information, and you can follow that on segd.org. And I also wanted to mention, because Jan was my entry point and, early in my career working with the Smithsonian to accessible design. And so I just can't thank her enough for being connected all those years and all of her amazing work that she does. So I wanted to make sure to do that shout out for Jan. But thank you, Valerie, Annie, Beth, wonderful, and our great ASL interpreters. And I'm just gonna give a few updates, Nadia, if you'll bring the slides up. So if you're not a member of SEGD, we are having a special welcome 26 discount. You get 26% for this year. So you can just go to segd.org, and there will be a place in membership where you can plug that in to get a discount. And we are doing our first boot camps. They're professional development intensive half-day sessions. We're going to be in Orlando alongside the International Sign Association, and we have a full accessibility design boot camp, our first one for specifically environmental graphics. We're going to be talking about new codes that are coming. We're going to have hands-on activities so you can actually see the impact of usage and contrast and all of these things that will be really critical for our exhibition and wayfinding environmental graphics community to be aware of as these laws are enacted. We're also doing a project management boot camp. And then for our museum folks, you can go to the next slide, Nadia. We're going to be in Philly ahead of AAM. So we have an amazing rooftop party at the Kimpton Hotel Monaco, which will be a lot of fun on Tuesday, May 19th. So come to Philly early for that. And then a very interactive session on that Wednesday at the Weitzman Museum. Sorry. And then we'll be in X Lab. Yes, Nadia, you can, in New York. And then finally, we will be in Kansas City for our annual conference, October 22nd through 24th. And we have more wonderful voices webinars that are coming up. The next one will be April 16th. So you just go ahead and you can sign up for them because they're free. And if you don't make it, you can get a copy of the recording. And if you don't know, we do an academic summit every year, which is virtual, and it's wonderful. It's 2 days of sessions from educators and students and practitioners on topics such as accessibility and sustainability and other wonderful topics on experience design. So join us for that. And thank you, Marie, and to all of our speakers and to the Museum Exhibition Professional Practice Group. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.